Record on, and we are recording. Hi, Albert.
Hi, Natalie. How's it going?
Good. I'm so glad to talk to you about our second asynchronous module to support virtual instruction and learning. So we were going to begin with some questions the two of us have been thinking about as we develop this module. So I'm going to let you begin by asking questions, and then we'll kind of jump in together, if that sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've gotten a lot of great information from the Distance Learning Playbook. Really, really good resource for everybody. And so one of the things that they mentioned in that chapter is a quote, and they attribute it to Mary Poppins, but it's actually a quote that's been used and attributed to lots of different people. But in Mary Poppins, she says, "Well begun is half done." And my question would be, how does this land on you, Nat?
So when I think about that phrase, I think about how important that first couple of weeks is regarding student engagement, that teachers really need to be intentional around the procedures and structures that they're building into their classrooms. And that would be normal in a face-to-face environment, but in a virtual environment, it becomes even more critical because it's not normal. It's not the normal way of learning for students or for teachers. So if we can start with some really structured ways to engage in learning and to engage in the community in the virtual space, I think that's a great first step, but those have to carry through in terms of our instructions. So we have to start there, but we can't just sit in that space. So that's how
Yeah.
it lands on me. What about you?
Absolutely. So I've got a quote actually that I pulled from the book. I'm going to cheat just a little, but they say from a study in 2008, being proactive, not reactive, is key to good classroom management. Classrooms without a class-wide approach to learning have more instances of negative student-teacher interactions and less time spent on academic instruction. So it's that proactive approach. It's that filling of the bucket at the beginning of the year
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
kind of can continue on throughout, and just establishing norms and expectations and procedures. It's just super critical. And it's never too late to go back and do that, but you're gonna save time in the long run if you really are solid in that, and continuing to go back and revisit those throughout. I feel like that's super important. So yeah, when I guess Mary Poppins was correct, if we establish those things really well at the outset, it's going to pay off in the future, and we will thank ourselves, and the students, I think, will be better prepared as well, as we've been kind of talking about in Brene Brown's book, Clear is Kind,
Yes.
Unclear is Unkind. So
Mhm.
being clear with students about these are the expectations, and that really is, that aligns itself a lot with Hattie's effect sizes, because students' perception of their own learning and high expectations from teachers really
Mhm.
do yield high effect sizes. So pretty cool with that.
And teacher clarity is right up there almost to a 1.0. So being very clear with expectations on the outset, I agree, is absolutely critical right now.
Exactly. So that jumps right into the next question. What are norms, and why are norms important? So something that, and I'll just jump in first
Mhm.
and then give you a breather for a second, but norms being these things that you establish with students. It's these, in a way, in some cases they are interchangeable with expectations, but in a lot of cases they are their own kind of thing. Like, these are the things that you come up with your students to help your class go smoothly, and
Mhm.
it's a matter of setting those up at the outset. They can be simple. There are some things that we'll get into in the next question, but um, just these simple procedures and this whole idea that it's not necessarily, a lot of folks say, rules, and
Mhm.
rules are great, but norms just is kind of a different spin on it. And I feel like rules in some cases have a negative connotation. So
Mhm.
these are the norms. These are our shared norms with one another, the teachers and the students.
So the thing in the book that struck me is that they talked about them being agreements. And so I think that really lands into our next question around when co-creating norms, what should we consider? The first part is that these are agreements, and they're things that both parties must commit to for the learning to work or for the relationship to work. And I really do consider the teacher-student interchange a real relationship, and it takes time to develop, and it takes a lot of effort to strengthen. And having agreements and norms on how we treat each other and what we do to engage in learning in this space is one way we show that we care and that we love each other and that we appreciate the work that we all are doing in that space. So why don't you talk to us a little bit then about what you as a classroom teacher, because you used to do this very well when I worked with you in the classroom. So what would you consider when co-creating norms with your students?
Yeah, so the book actually nailed it right on the head. Less is more, and a lot of times there are the example I give. There's some constitutions, as a socialist person, there's some constitutions in the world that are so exhaustive, right? And they're laid out for every single possible scenario, and then there's still something that happens and it doesn't align well with the Constitution. Like, you don't want this exhaustive list of norms. You want it to be short, sweet, to the point. A few things that you agree on as between the student and the teacher. You want to build them with the students. You want to co-create the norms. That's super important so that there's clarity on both sides. You want to make sure they're positive. You want it to, not don't do this, don't do that, but keep them positive. So these are the things that we set forth for our classroom community. Be super specific because again, less is more, but being specific is gonna be clearer for the kids. And if they are in need of a facelift, be okay with that. Revisit them often as needed. And in some schools they have social contracts. I know that that's another piece where they all sign it, and they might have particular norms for different classes depending on what the students feel like they need for that particular group. And teaching norms and rehearsing those expectations and rehearsing how to follow those norms. It sounds really corny, but getting a kid to say in a Zoom meeting or something like that, like, what might we say things like, I'm a good listener or something like that. Like, what might a good listener look like? Or just rehearsing some of those things so that they are clear on the expectation. That's going to be important as well. So most definitely.
So something you used to do that and that other teachers in our building did where we were, that I thought was really critical in terms of norms, were that you began the lesson with kind of going over what are the norms, behaviors we're going to demonstrate today for learning to go well. And then you ended the lesson by referring to those and checking, how did we do? And that is something that they talk about in the book and in the videos in this module that people are going to see, is that you need to begin your lessons and you need to be ending them or referring to them and kind of self-assessing about them along the way. Right. That's how we get better, and that's how we teach students to be truly self-managers of their learning. And in a virtual space, that's probably even more critical than it ever was, because students do have to be self-directed to fully engage in the experience. So I think you were spot on, Albert.
Yeah, and I know in some Socratic seminars and even in faculty meetings, a lot of times we would say, pick one of those norms and hold it on your pinky, or actually physically write it down, one that you want to be cognizant of throughout the lesson, something that maybe I need to work on. For instance, it might be sharing the air. Like, that's one I always pick. I don't want to take up too much airtime when there are other folks that have voices and opinions and things like that. Yeah, definitely. Lots of tips and tricks. And this goes hand in hand with teacher clarity and just, again, being really, really clear and upfront with students so that it's not a mystery. You're very clear. So it finally jumps into, again, kind of parallel to this and intersecting with this, why are expectations, routines, and procedures critical? These are a little different from norms, they all kind of are bundled in this kind of basket together. But
Mhm.
why are those things really critical as in a virtual situation or in a hybrid face-to-face situation?
So these are those technical pieces. So a lot of times students will make up the rules if they, in the absence of some sort of procedure, they'll make up what they think they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to act. And so when we clearly lay out what our expectations are for participating in a Zoom, or what the routines are for handing in work, or what the procedures are for participating in um, a breakout space with our peers, like when we really are clear and tell children what it is we expect, 99% of the time they do what they're supposed to do. And so my and this is from my 20 years of experience as an educator. When I was in the classroom, it was so much better when I just told them what I needed them to do. Make those technical things clear so that their brain power and what they're doing is engaging in the content. They're not trying to engage in whether am I doing this right? Am I acting right? Am I, they're not filling in the gaps. And so this is the stuff that we can just take off the table in terms of their cognitive load.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like something that I used to do with my students that might be helpful, but to just clarify and say, these are my expectations of you as a student. What are your expectations of me as your teacher?
Mhm.
And that kind of was a litmus test or kind of a North Star for me, just to say, um, this is the expectation, and there's a lot that folks are learning right now. So getting into routines of how do I take attendance
Mhm.
in a Zoom meeting, or how do I, monitor and make sure that I'm recording if I need to for an IEP or for some other need for a student who might not be there for whatever reason. How do I ensure that I contact the parent or get somebody else involved, an administrator, if there is some sort of an issue with absences or somebody being late? All those things are things that folks are learning, and um, we have to again give ourselves some grace,
Mhm.
and be patient, because there is a lot. But establishing those routines and procedures is going to be really, really critical, not just for the students, but what are the routines that you now need to think
Mhm.
about as
Mhm.
a virtual teacher, as you dig into all the different kinds of things. It's just different kind of work. It's things that you probably in some way, shape, or form did as a face-to-face person, but
Mhm.
it's a different way of going about it. So as we're learning those things, it's going to get better and better, I feel like.
Yeah. So guys, as you go through this module, we, both Albert and I, want to encourage you to be thinking about and reflecting on the content along the way. As we stated in the intro slide, there are going to be points in the module where you need to be reflecting and kind of writing what you're thinking along the way. So these are great ways to get your class going and going strong. So we encourage you to take your time to reflect and think as you go. And as always, we are here and available to you should you have questions. We care about you. We know you are A+ teachers and educators, and we encourage you to reach out with questions. Thanks, Albert.
See ya.